Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Scouting Sessions. My name is still Jérôme Bérubé, and my co-host is still Brad Allen. Inside baseball here, when we decided to do a weekly podcast together, we decided it was going to be a weekly podcast, so one episode for each week. And what better way to start our podcast with 4 straight episodes in the same week? Brad, my question to you to start this episode: how are you doing, and how are you surviving this week of podcasting?
Well, I'm snipping like 9 to 10 hours of goalie clips a day. So for the scouting school, this is my downtime. So I guess I'm in survival mode. So I'm doing okay with it. But I get to travel to Ontario next week. I'm in Newfoundland, so that will help. It's the weather here is way more volatile than it is back in Ontario here, so that's going to be a good thing. I look forward to that. But I'm doing okay. It's one of those situations for us, I think, where hockey's just getting started. So there's like this anticipation phase where it's like, oh, okay, new draft, new players everywhere, new prospects, new sweeping, and then like you're getting ready for the NHL to see and identify how different it is from a year-to-year basis. One thing we have to do as scouts, always have to adapt and see how the NHL is looking and try to figure out what talent is going to work for the NHL that you think's there now and going to be there in 4 to 5 years. So it's exciting times overall, I'd say. But there's also like this itch where it's like, can everything just start? let's get the season going.
Yeah. Before we start, so obviously episode 4 will be on the Metropolitan division. Just before that, I just want to remind everyone, you can. If you have missed episode 1, we did talk about the Pacific Division, episode 2, the Central Division, and episode 3, the Atlantic Division. And also, if you want to help us grow our channel, like our videos, subscribe to our channel. And if you do that, we're going to become best friends. And at some point, we might do some live streaming at some point during the year. So let's get back to hockey, Brad. Let's start with the Carolina Hurricanes, who are the first team we're going to talk about. And they have a lot of interesting prospects. Obviously, Alexander Nikishin is one of maybe the best player outside the NHL. He's been a star defenseman in the KHL for 2 years now. He's quite a story. Bradley Nadeau at number 2, just played at Maine University. Just turned pro. Terrific young hockey player. Not much weakness in his game. Like obviously the size skating has improved enough to hold at the NHL level. That guy can really shoot a puck. Can score from anywhere in the offensive zone. He also competes hard. Like he's I wouldn't say he's not Seth Jarvis, but he might be like a poor version of Seth Jarvis going forward. Scott Morrow is a very toolsy offensive defenseman. In this case, he might be a boom bust type of talent. He just finished, I believe, his 3rd year in college. So he just turned pro. He's definitely a guy who can run a power play. It's gonna be. I'm curious to see how he does at the pro level. We had some pretty fun viewings of him in his draft year where he looked like really good in high school, and then when he was called up to play at the USHL level, he was really struggling, and that really hurt us as far as ranking him, because we had him 61, but we had him a lot higher than that before he played in the USHL at the end of the year and come playoff time, and that really kind of burn us as far as his evaluation and ranking him in our final rankings. That we really struggled with that because he was so bad at the USHL level. Alexander Rykov is currently hurt, but he's definitely one of those guys that we were really high on compared to pretty much everyone. But he's a player we like. Felix Angersurum, I believe he was the youngest player of his draft class, and we had him 55. Looks way too low at this point. He looks like he's going to be a really, really good player. The only thing he lacks is maybe the skating for his size, but he's such a smart and a smart hockey player and a very good playmaker. And maybe I can finish with Gleb Trikazov, who we really like him in his draft year. Possibly the development didn't go as well as we had planned. So he struggled after his draft year. He played either in the MHL or VHL. He was never able to crack the KHL. He turned pro last spring, so he's in North America right now. I didn't see those games, but I saw his name on the score sheet. I believe he had a hat trick in a rookie game this past weekend. So I'm looking forward to see him like away from Russia and playing in North America, see how he does, because he's super talented. He can really shoot a puck. He can really pass it too. The skating is really good too. The compete can be really good sometimes a bit average. So a ton of guys here for to talk about for Carolina. They have a really solid prospect pool. Brad, anybody you want to mention here?
I mean, what Russian factor, right? That's their mentality. There is no Russian factor. That's how Carolina operates, and it's, I think, a good mentality because we had the most Russians come into the NHL in like over a decade just the other year, right? So Nikishin is basically a Russian version of PK Subban. He's an incredibly assertive player. Scott Morrow and him actually do have one similarity, which is at the offensive line. They are not afraid at all to use their edge work and spin off pressure and constantly drive possession from the back end. So that is one similarity. But Nikishin is a bulldozer on skates. He is extremely mean at times, where Morrow is much more passive. That would be like the biggest distinction between the two of them. When you look at a contrast, Felix Ungerstorm, I kick myself. He falls in the Matthew Poitras category for us, where we really liked what he was, but the toolkit relative to the skating, like just the skating frame combination just wasn't what we thought was going to be able to be managed at the NHL level. So we missed on both as a result of that, I think. But yeah, Ungerstorm was fantastic in his draft year. I had all the time in the world for him. It's just, again, we just thought he was a bit too small and the skating wasn't good enough at that time. But he's also the youngest player in the draft, so we should have probably taken his growth rate into consideration at a higher rate than we did. To Jerome's point, we're super high on Scott Morrow, and then we threw him off a cliff because of his smaller sample at the USHL. Oops, that's a mistake. Alex Rykov, I had as an A-rated player. I am a huge fan of Rykov's game. I think he's going to be an exceptionally useful middle six, 200-foot forward. Dominic Badinka is the wild card for me. I think if Badinka matures and becomes he was kind of two players for us when we had our viewings of him. If you took like 4 or 5 game sample, couldn't make a pass, wasn't doing anything right, didn't look like you play, and then next 4 to 5 game sample, everything was clicking, connecting his passing plays, was thinking 2 steps ahead, showing advanced playmaking at times. I was like, oh, okay, well, he's just inconsistent. But if you take like his peak performances, he really does look like a top 4 insulator that could really emerge. And he's something they need, because you look at what they're bringing in, like Scott Morrow and Nikishin, they need insulation. There are going to be players who are going to be just rovers. They're going to be defensive rovers. They're going to be all over the ice, be pinching constantly. They need somebody that's like a Dominic Badinka that gives them insulation. So Badinka is critical in terms of being able to actually make it. Nikita Artamonov, I feel, and Ungerstorm have some similarities, where they're more reliant on their edge work and their playmaking ability, and they're both very, very smart players. They're thinkers. So there's some similarities there. Rykov also is a playmaker and a thinker. Gleb Trikazov is the ultimate wild card. He's over here now, right, in North America, Jerome?
Yeah.
So that's huge. Like, let's find out what he actually is. We're going to find out what Gleb Trikazov is actually all about, because he has tremendous talent. It's just if he can just bring it together. That's the main thing, is he just needs to become a cohesive player and understand how to operate within the given skill set he has. So Carolina, always for us, like one of the top drafting organizations, because they have very similar philosophically to us. It reminds me of Toronto. We are very high on Russian players. We think almost all the hidden value in each draft is in Russia. And they, quite frankly, did a better job with it than us, because they got Alexander Nikishin, and we botched it. The other thing I'll say is Bradley Nadeau is awesome. I'm happy that he left college early. I love it when a kid's willing to like test himself and thinks he can accelerate his development. How many kids go from the BCHL to the NHL in 2 calendar seasons, right? Like, that's just unheard of. So I hope he pulls it off. And Carolina's in a great spot, fantastic spot. The only issue they have in their entire prospect pool, and you can probably tell by the top 10 we have, is their goaltending depth. Nikita Quap is not going to, I shouldn't say never, but like I did watch him pretty recently. I think he falls in the Nico Dawes territory for me, actually, in the sense that their skating bases are under. I don't think he can get the skating necessary to have the lateral mobility and the weight transfers to be able to play at the NHL level as of now. That could change. We'll see. But yeah, so Quap's a bit under. I'm not a huge fan of their other goalie prospects. So it's up to Kochetkov to really take the reins if Freddie Anderson goes down this season. But besides their goaltending prospect depth, like everything else is looking pretty good here for Carolina.
Yeah, and they have other guys that are not in top 10, like Emil Salmi, Ronan Seeley, Joel Nystrom. So they have a lot of guys that are
a lot of depth.
So moving on, Columbus Blue Jackets now will be, as you see, the top 10 here. Caden Lindstrom, obviously, we love that player. We rank him second overall. Obviously, the injury concern is still a thing. He's not, taking part in the Columbus training camp, and but we'll see. I mean, they didn't draft him to play at 18. They're drafting him for him, to contribute when he's 21, 22, 23, 24, and so we'll see. David Yarechek maybe taking a bit longer to really establish himself at the NHL level, but he's a terrific talent. Danton Matichuk just had a spectacular season in the WHL. Long playoff run with Moose Jaw all the way to the Memorial Cup, and he was really good for Canada. One of the few player on Canada at the U20 to do pretty well. If you look at the rest of their top 10 here, Gavin Brindley is a guy that we were too harsh on in his draft year. He's going to be a pretty good player for them. He's a smaller player, but he can really skate, and he also really competes. Stanislas Vozil is an interesting defenseman that has it's been quite amusing watching him develop, because sometimes one year we would say, oh, I don't know about the skill level, and then the year after that he just shocks us with some skill, some showing of skills. So he's been an interesting one. I feel like he's a guy that could surprise some people. Charlie Elick, so Columbus got him at 36. That was pretty high for us. We had him 52. We didn't like the puck skills. We didn't like the puck management under pressure. We think he's more of a, if he plays his part, he's more of a third pairing right defenseman that plays physical. But the similar to maybe Tyler Clevin in Ottawa, he's gonna have to improve his decision making to become that third pairing, physical defenseman. Jordan Dumais, he's still hurt, but he's super talented, super smart. But he's 5'8", and he's a below average skater, so that's a bit of an issue for him. And maybe something you'll mention, Brad, but we got two goalies at the end here, so maybe you want to touch on those two guys, but I'll let you go here.
Sure. Both misses by me. Jack Greaves in his draft season, I just thought he was just too small for his skill set, too limited. He's developed extremely well. Definitely looks at least an NHL backup right now. Sergei Ivanov, I thought his toolkit was under the mark. He's just not very explosive in his draft year, not great extension rates. To be that small and to play I'm looking at Saros, I'm looking at Dustin Wolf, I'm looking at Gorgiev, I'm looking at that style of goalie prospect. He is not that. However, he's coming off an incredible season. He's forcing my hand here. We got to include him in the top 10 based off a season. But Greaves, I think Greaves is a more likely player to actually hit. The other aspects, I think the wild card right now would be Svozil. Svozil is spectacular at the U20s. And I remember talking to Rick Nash, and Rick was saying how he thought of him as offensive forward coming out of his draft. And I was like, an offensive forward. Because almost everybody thought of him as a two-way guy. And like, really, we thought of him as like, maybe he could turn into more of like almost like a specialized puck mover who like can defend relatively well if his skating gets there. And like now like Rick Nash was right. Who would have guessed? Rick was definitely right on the money when it came to the fact there was offensive ceiling that we didn't see. Do you know what? It honestly reminds me of a fellow Czech prospect, totally different player, different position, but Juraj Kulik. Like they didn't show half of what they did until they got to the junior ranks. Like U18s for Kulik, and when he was Svozil, it was the WHL when he came over. It was just like with Drina, it was just it's just a different beast. Like there was like legitimately maybe like two sequences I saw. I saw like 25 games of him in this draft year. Maybe two sequences where it showed that untapped upside that ended up being what he actually is. Like it's crazy how some of these kids like Moritz Seider, like you take away his world championships, like he was kind of the same thing. Like he didn't show as much offensive ceiling as some people might suggest, and we were the highest on Moritz Seider. So it can be a tricky game trying to figure out which one of these kids is going to untap their offensive ceiling from the back end. But he's the wild card because we know Mateychuk and Juracek have a ton of offense. So what if Svozil can bring it too, right? Because that's what Columbus needs help everywhere, but that would be huge for them if Svozil can hit with the top five players here. Charlie Elick reminds me a lot of Erica Branson. I think that's one of the reasons that they went and got him is Erica Branson's not getting any younger. You know, he's starting to get up there, and every team does want a player that's like this. It's just all about the likelihood that they actually can hit the projection and play clean enough hockey to get it done. The one thing I'll say about him is, we weren't as high on him, but he did play better in the second half, and he did show a bit more. Like he's never going to be anything at the offensive line, but he did show more in transition. He did look more comfortable, and he did acclimate to the pace of play in the dub at a bit better rate than he did earlier on in the season. Like earlier on, he was just blind swing passes, blind exits. Like he just all over the map. He did clean up his game somewhat. So this season, we're going to be looking to see if he can clean it up that much more. But it's an interesting crop of players. Like one thing with Columbus, like, you know, Kekalainen's gone now, but like one thing with Jarmo and that staff is like they did not care. Like if they liked somebody, they just take them. They didn't care how many games the player had. They didn't care what rankings looked like. They kind of did their own thing, and I always have respect for that. But you know, admittedly, like sometimes it comes back to bite you, and it did with them occasionally. But sometimes they got some hits too. So like Dmitry Voronkov. So one of those players was draft year. You saw him skate. You'd be like, oh, man, I don't know. It's probably not going to happen. Dmitry Voronkov is one of those unique unicorn, freakish power forwards you'll see in the game right now. So they've got some pretty unique players they've hit on. So if they can grab especially the top five here, if the top five can hit, they have a ton of talent coming in. Like Columbus is going to be dangerous sooner rather than later because they have a lot of talent.
Moving on to the New Jersey Devils. Obviously, at number one, Anton Silayev. Brad, you're a huge fan of him. Last season, Arseny Griciuk. He was a fifth-round pick in 2019, but he's probably one of the more underrated prospects on the planet. He's going to be a good one when he finally comes over. He's going to be a good one. Very smart. Competes hard. It's funny that he was drafted by the Devils, but even going back to his draft year, I saw him as somewhat like, and for like younger fans, you might not know who that is, but I remember watching the Devils when they were winning those cup in the mid '90s, late '90s. Sergei Brylin was my comp for Griciuk, and nothing has really changed. I still think he can be like a really good middle six forward. You know, he can score. He can also create play with his playmaking, and also competes. Can play on the power play. He can play on the penalty kill. So lots to like here. Mikhail Yegorov was a goalie that we liked in last year's draft. We rank him. He was a third-ranked goalie. Amron Traff, a big power forward out of Sweden. Very interesting toolkit. Like he's a big kid. He moves well. Some inconsistency, which made him drop in the draft because he looks like a top 50 pick on his best game. He looks like a clear-cut top 50, even top 40 pick. But not every game is that, you know, at that level. And yeah, so Brad, maybe you want to touch on a few guys for the Devils here.
Well, so I'll give us a little bit of credit. Nikishin burned us in Russia there, but Arsenio Gricic, we were the highest on Gricic in his draft year. I was extremely high on him. I loved him. I think he's going to be very good. Lenny Huminaho. That was one I remember last year saying to you guys, I thought we had him too low. Well, turns out we had him too low. He's looking the part. Lenny Amino will play in the NHL, most likely in a third line role, but he is a very, very unique player in the sense that he has incredible attention to detail. He's almost Mark Stone-esque in some ways off the puck. I would make that argument. He's incredible at staying above the puck. He's incredible anticipating passing lanes in advance off the puck. So yes, he's not the fastest skater. In fact, he's an ugly skater, but he can anticipate so well. He can get into lanes in advance, and that will make up for some of the issues with his skating. He also has more offensive upside than I think we initially thought. Even when I was the most bullish on him, I still didn't think he'd score at the rate he did this past season. So that's another. Seamus Casey. I think we would argue right now if Casey really should be 2, right? Like this is super tight to me. Gritzia, Camino, Casey. Like if any Devils fans out there, or anybody who looks at prospects and says, "Oh, Casey looks too low here," I think you definitely make an argument because Seamus Casey is the real deal. Seamus Casey is coming off an excellent season. Looks like he can become something for the Devils. And I'll say the wild card here. There's a couple. Like Daniil Orlov is a huge wild card. Out of the KHL. He has a tremendous toolkit, incredible skater, one of the only prospects out of Sakalinsky-Akuli's system that we've ever actually had to scout long-term. They border Japan, just in case you guys want to know how distance that is. They have really cool shark jerseys, though. Daniil Misyul. They need insulation. Daniil Misyul. That might be the wild card for me. The half Belarusian, half Russian. Like Daniil Misyul has all the potential in the world of being a true shutdown defender. It's taken him a long time. To get there, but maybe he can become something that everybody who's not a Devils fan goes, who in the heck is that? And just shuts down all the opposing top 6 forwards. So I very unique crop of forwards and defensemen, I'd say. Like I use that word too much right now, but it's true. Like there's like Hamina Ho has like Mark Stone qualities. Gritsiuk I would say now that we're talking about them, I feel like Arseniy Gritsiuk has a lot of similarities to Felix Ungersorm. Especially in their draft season, both incredibly intelligent players, and the toolkits weren't great, and the skating's kind of but they were dominant too internationally. Gritsiuk was incredible against the program in his draft year. I remember that one game he dominated the program, and that was one of the best programs ever. That was the 2019 program. So it's one of those situations where if you see a Russian dominate that program, then you know they're real. And Gritsiuk did that at the Five Nations. I've never forgotten that performance. But yeah, Herman Traff, to Jerome's point, one of the most underrated power forwards that I really think the Devils did a good job of grabbing there. Herman Traff has a tremendous amount of potential as your typical north-south power forward who can pot 15, 20 goals for you. Just a beast of a kid, incredible athlete, super explosive power skater, and he can hang on to pucks. We've seen him make some remarkably dynamic plays coming off the walls even. So lots of potential there. I really liked some of the picks they made. So, I think the Devils are in a pretty good position. And I mean, I think that they're one of the candidates to be a breakout team this season, really, and really get going again. And I think their pool is a bit underrated.
All right, moving on to the New York Islanders. Very unique top 10. Obviously, Cole Eiserman, their first round pick in last June NHL draft. Jesse Polkinen, a guy that we ranked 31st, went 54 in the second round to the Islanders. Very, very toolsy, very fun, 6'6" offensive defenseman. Some interesting guy here. Maxim Silplakov just signed as a free agent out of the KHL. It's going to be interesting how he adapts to the smaller highs at the NHL level. Will he play at the NHL level, or he might start in the AHL? Who knows? A few goalie here, Marcus Gidlov. He was so interesting, like that. He actually only went in the 5th round, so he was our 4th ranked goalie, but he went a lot later than what we projected. And also Henrik Tikkanen, another goalie, another monster goalie. So Gidlov is 6'6", 212. Tikkanen 6'7", 201. Again, just be patient with those goalies. That's the key. And the rest, Kalle Aldelius out of Sweden. We mentioned that he was playing with Djurgården, with the Lekkerimäki, the Ogren, the Oslund. and also Adam Engstrom. An interesting top 10, not super deep and not super high on talent if you take out Yzerman and Paul Kunin. Brad, what's your take on the Islanders prospect pool here in the top 10?
One of the strangest prospect pools, simply one of the strangest possible. Doesn't mean the worst, and it doesn't mean they didn't do some good things. They have. I'm a huge fan of Jesse Pulkkinen. Thought it was a fantastic pick. I think their goaltending depth is incredibly underrated from a prospect perspective. Marcus Gidloff went 19th, the 19th goalie selected in last year's class. That is crazy to me. Why did it happen? Skating. Teams are starting to get very, very worried about goalies that are not showing skating bases in their initial draft season. However, he's 6'6", 210 pounds. So I felt like he should get some benefit of the doubt. He also showed some acclimation at the end of the season that gave me hints that I think his skating base can improve to the necessary level, which is why we had him so much higher. But he has a lot of potential. He also has a tremendous amount of potential for injury. I should say that. And that's because he's in a reverse VH way too often to compensate for his lack of small area skating mechanics. So he needs to get the small area skating mechanics developed so that he can rely less on his reverse VH, because as any young goalie here listening to this knows, like the amount of torque generated on your hip line when you're that big and reverse VH is crazy. And like the amount, like look at like Luukkonen's just coming off a hip surgery. So many goalies are coming off hip surgeries. The reason why is because when you're reverse VH too often, especially if you like your skate to post instead of skate lace to post, like the amount of torque that's generated on the hip is too much. So yes, there is injury risk factors with him. Henrik Tikkanen is a total dark horse. So this kid came out of nowhere, 7th round pick. All over them, very similar, I would say, developmentally to Nikita Talapilo. So Nikita Talapilo, incredible athlete, but very raw, right? That was kind of and then it took him time. Then he got to the second year Allsvenskan, he took off, and now he's looking very good in the A. Henrik Tikkanen was all over the place, Liga, Allsvenskan, and then he's playing in the ECHL, the AHL. He looked way too inconsistent when I saw him in the Allsvenskan and Liga, and then he comes over to the ECHL. I thought he was inconsistent there. Then he gets called up the AHL, and he looks like it's like, whoa, okay, this is what happens when you give him real structure. Now he's starting to really look confident in net. I thought he found a totally different level. He's one for me now where he's a total dark horse. Like he might legitimately be an NHL player, NHL goalie long term. So with Gidloff and him, super super interesting depth. The other, Jérôme mentioned Maxim Siplikov. So for the Islanders fans out there, we want to know what you're getting. So Siplikov, not a great skater. That's the first thing I'll say. Not a player who's going to be very good in open ice. He's not going to be very dangerous in transition due to his skating. However, phenomenal puck handler, incredibly poised, and he's a fantastic puck handler. So he uses his puck handling very similar to Andrei Kuzmenko in that regard. That specific quality, uses his handling to extend his operating windows, then has the poise and knows how to calibrate and calculate what's around him so he can get something done within his time and space. So he could be extremely dangerous net front, but unlike Kuzmenko, who's very soft, this kid, I shouldn't call him a kid, he's 25. Siplikov is not. Maxim Siplikov is a very tenacious forward. He has no problem playing in he's already a North American style player. Like that's the beautiful thing about Maxim Siplikov is he should adapt to North American ice when it comes to the physicality of the game at a much faster pace than you typically see with some of the other Russians. So there is actual potential there for Siplikov as long as the skating can hold and not allow him to get drowned out in transition. And then obviously the wild card of wild cards is like Cole Yzerman. I think we're the lowest on him, Jérôme, out of anybody publicly. Listen, he's an incredible shooter, but like the adaptation, like I don't know if he can adapt long term. And he's not a great skater. If he was a great skater, I'd have a very different projection for him. But he's an average skater, and it's his development's critical though for this organization. Like they have tried this before and it has not worked. They've tried it multiple times. Oliver Wahlstrom is busting. Kiefer Bellows busted. This is their third attempt at this player type. They must hit now. This has to be a hit. And I will say this though, Cole Yzerman is the most interesting. And like, yes, we had Oliver Wahlstrom way too high. We did. But I will say this, Cole Yzerman at least has that energy to him, that bravado that I feel like Wahlstrom never did. and Kiefer Bellows never did. There's something a bit more unique with Yzerman when it comes to that trait specifically. And I feel like for snipers, like true snipers, like Cole Caulfield style players, they have to have that moxie, because when they go cold, which is inevitable, they have to have the confidence necessary to be able to bring it back out and bring that goal scoring back into the fray there. And like, he has the potential to do that. And like, all he's ever done is score. So, enormously important for their organization. Jesse Pulkkinen as well, incredibly important that those two players hit long term for their organization.
Yeah, and quick mention, William Dufour, 8th ranked prospect here. So that's a guy that I saw play midget AAA in Quebec City, and then he played in the Q. He started his career in Rwanda, then got traded to Chicoutimi, then Drummondville, then St. John's. So played for 4 teams in the Q. The thing about him is that he's a good sized player, unbelievable shooter, can really shoot the puck, can score from a different angle. You saw in his last year in junior, he was the MVP of the Memorial Cup in St. John. He had his, by far his most successful season, that season. I still had some question mark because of his skating. He's not a good skater. He's a below average skater. But his first pro year, he got some NHL games. So I was like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. But then his second year, this past season he didn't have a good season in American Hockey League, and he's a scorer, he's a shooter, and he didn't really score a whole lot. So
Jerome, one thing about him, really interesting fact here, is that in that year in the Q, when he blew up the Q and had over 50, he had the most short side goals out of any player I've ever seen. He had like 20, it was over 25. It was like the most short side goals I've ever seen. So I was thinking, like, for his translation to the A, that's not happening. He's going up against AHL goalies from the Q. It's not as different world. So for me, it was about his shooting adjustment. Could he learn to take advantage of the far side instead of trying to manipulate goalies on their short side as often as he did? And so that might be one of the reasons he's had some of the difficulty he's having.
So anyway, I think the next season will be a huge one. It will be obviously a contract year. That will be the last year of his entry-level contract. So he's going to have to obviously have a good camp with the Islanders. But, if he starts, which is likely going to happen with in the AHL, he's going to have to produce. Moving on now to the New York Rangers, who are an interesting prospect pool here. Gabriel Perreault, who the Rangers, they stole him with the 23rd pick in the draft in 2023. He was ranked 9 on our list. His first season in college last season was, pretty spectacular. He was great at the U20 also. Super talented player. Obviously, the skating size combo is not awesome, but the rest of his toolkit and his talent is just it's very, very good. So he's off. He's going to stay in college for one more season, I believe. So he's going to be back at Boston College this season. He lost his center. Will Smith turned pro, but some guy named James Agans will be his center this upcoming season with Ryan Leonard on the other wing. So I think this should be fine. Brandon Ottman, power forward, high energy power forward who can score some goals. I think he saw what William Cooley did last year with the Rangers. I think he's going to try to do that this season with the Rangers, if he, at least in camp, to play that same kind of role. Adam Sikora is a guy that doesn't get a whole lot of love out there, but we really like this player. Is he going to be a top 2-line player? No, but the Rangers got him 63rd overall. We had him ranked 30. We think he can be a very nice, smart, energy, high compete 3rd-line forward who can really kill his penalty, can play left wing, center, right wing. Super good energy. Really good teammate. Lots to like with that player. Obviously, if you're looking just for pure skills, he's probably not going to be that guy that you really like. But I think he's his character is really strong, and I think he has a really good chance to be like a really good bottom six player at the NHL level. AJ Emery, well, we didn't really buy into the hype that he had last year. We really questioned the decision making, the handling, puck skills, the actual offensive upside. But he's a really good athlete, and he can play a physical game. He can defend pretty well. So we'll see. But we were definitely not on the same board as people that had him as a first round pick. Brett Berard at 7, similar to Sikora. Like, I like his energy. I think he has maybe a potential to be a bottom 6 guy at the NHL level. And Raoul Boilard was a guy that I really liked in his first half of the season last season, and we ranked him pretty high in our first few rankings. But I didn't like his second half of the season. He struggled. He didn't play enough inside, so he didn't compete hard enough for me to really like him. And he finished 66 on our board. So, and the Rangers got him in the 4th round, which is it's a fine pick in the 4th round. So we'll see how he does this year. But his second half of the season and playoff kind of left me wondering, like, if he's really gonna make it in the long run for the NHL. Brad,
I would say the dark horse here is Bryce McConnell-Barker. Bryce McConnell-Barker, I didn't have that much time for him in his draft season, and I feel like his development's been pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with him. Like, not the highest point producer or anything like that, but like the combination of handling ability and just the consistency rates have gone up. And I just thought he was not going to ever execute at the rate he currently has. And I just didn't think that much of his skill set. And I think I'm wrong. I think Bryce McConnell-Barker for them is probably one of the dark horse prospects for the organization. I think he has a chance to be pretty good. But I mean, like, obviously Gabe Perreault is their gem. And then like Brendan Othman must hit. Simple as that. Brendan Othman's got to hit. He's been up and down. Like, I'm watching him live with Mark in the playoffs in London. Like, when he was against London, like, he was awful. He was really bad there. So I was discouraged because we really liked him. And like, even when we watched him together in Switzerland, right? That was where we really, really thought highly of him. And his curve has been all over the place. I feel like he's been on a roller coaster trajectory. It's up and down, up and all over the map, right? So it'll be very interesting to see if he can hit a full-time role this season. But like, hopefully it's one of those situations where you got to get one of Sikora Othman to hit, essentially. Like, we definitely think Sikora can hit it, but like, if Othman can do it too, like, then you really have something, because those are very useful player types. Speaking to Sikora, top 3 shot blocking wingers outside the NHL. That's he does have specialization. He should be one of the most unique penalty killers in the game. He is incredible at reading the defensive line, specifically the defensive line. In his draft, Matthias Sopovalov and him were the two standouts. Sopovalov being the defensive center, Sikora being the winger. But I had never seen a kid at that age understand how to recognize how a line is operating as advanced as he did. And one thing that's fascinating about him is you look at like not Jack Hughes, like Quinn Hughes, you look at Kel McCarr, you look at those, just Blaine Hudson coming in, just incredibly dynamic players that know how to break down a line. Sikora is the one that projects to be able to match them. Like, he's the type of new age winger coming in that might be able to match their style from the line. So I'm going to be very interested to see his development. It's all about, does he have enough offensive talent to hold and hit 30 points like we think he can? That's the main thing with Sikora.
All right, let's move on to the Flyers. Obviously, Matvei Michkov will be the top guy, and maybe this year Rookie of the Year in the NHL. I'm also very curious to see the relationship between him and Torts. I think it's going to be pretty fun. But at the same time, we said the same thing about Owen Tippett was in the same boat, and his relationship is doing pretty well with Torts. So let's wait and see with Michkov. But he's obviously a wonderful talent. Up and down KHL career. Had to go play in Sochi, which usually it's not a good sign for any prospect that has to go to Sochi.
KHL beach town.
Yeah, you go to Sochi for the beach, not for hockey usually. So we'll see. Michkov is off to a pretty good start in the rookie camp in Philly. So, but Jet Luchenko, one of our favorite player in last year's draft, we just think he's so smart. If you look at our category like hockey sense, he gets a 8. Compete, it's a 7. Skill 7. Skating 8. Like there's no weakness in his skill set. The major weakness I would say is his shot. So we'll see how much he can improve his shot. Super smart player, one of the smartest player in last year's draft class. Oliver Bonk is looking pretty good out of London. Yegor Zavargin, I'm guessing, Brad, you're going to talk about him. And obviously Alexei Kolosov. Maybe not a Flyers for too long. We'll see if the next time we do a ranking like this, he's still Flyers. Brad, anybody you want to maybe focus here on?
Sure. So for Flyers fans who haven't gotten an opportunity to see Michkov too often, don't expect Pavel Bure. That's not how he plays. He is very unique. He's very cerebral, very patient. It's his off-puck play that makes him special. It's his route timing, skating pattern recognition. He knows how to find options away from the puck, knows how to go backdoor, knows how to get through coverage, knows how to become a ghost, and then the puck's in the back of the net. The other really interesting quality he has is that he is one of the most dynamic forwards I've ever seen at recognizing an open seam on a goalie. And he can do it with eyes in the back of his head. When he is spinning off of coverage, he seems to have a sixth sense to understand what the goalie is attempting to do in advance in terms of his movement. So it's like he's downloaded goalies in advance somehow. He's not Ovechkin with the shot. He's not overpowering goalies that often. I know you're wrong, of course, as he gets stronger, he'll have an opportunity to do that. But up to this point, that's not what he's known for. It's his ability to calibrate to a goalie's instincts and then find the seam at the exact moment he needs to that makes him special. And then it's his off-puck routes. It's not massive, dynamic, transitional, explosive rushes. This isn't like a Cutter Gauthier who's just going to be flying down the wing and just shooting from distance and scoring. He does not play that way. So it'll be very interesting to see how he handles his first season in the NHL. Jet Luchenko, I feel so bad for this kid. Fantastic prospect. And then Zeev Boom gets picked, right? The Zeev Boom situation, and everybody's like, why did Philly take Jet Luchenko? They had Zeev right there. What are they doing? And listen, Jet Luchenko is one of the most underrated prospects in hockey. We think that the online scouting community has him completely wrong. We had him top 15, basically the last half of the season. We had him top 15, Jerome, something around there. Yeah. We almost put him. Where did we end up putting him at the end? Like mid 13, 14? 12. So yeah, we think that the Flyers did very well here. Like, we are with Philly on this. We think that Luchenko is a home run type of player. Yes, he's not going to be a high-end goal scorer, but he's very gifted everywhere else. Exceptional skater, incredibly intelligent, fantastic pace of play, makes his teammates better, does everything you need. And he's a Tortorella-style player. He's what Tortorella wants. That you can't. He really is. It's exactly what Tortorella wants, and that's what you get. And then we got to go to one of my biggest misses, the one I'll never live down. That's Yegor Zavargin. So Yegor Zavargin, I didn't love him in his draft season. He was tankish and he was mechanical, and he wasn't. His performances for my viewings were not that great. And he's one of the best prospects in hockey, the goalie prospects in hockey. So what happened? Growth rate. He was an August birthday, I think. He was early birthday either way. And I did not factor in his growth rate correctly. And he took off, and now I am crushed. He looks the part. Alexei Kolosov. So I loved Alexei Kolosov in his draft season. When he was drafted, I should say, he was actually an overager. He was drafted, I think, a year or two after his initial draft season. When he was drafted by the Flyers, I had all the time in the world for him. He was our third-ranked goalie. I really thought of him as the next potential smaller goalie that could be a starter in the NHL. And to be honest with you, like, this whole situation makes no sense to me whatsoever. I'll explain why. So he accelerates his development, plays for Minsk, Dynamo Minsk, full-time in the KHL as like a 19, 20-year-old. That's pretty special. That's rare. And he does a pretty admirable job. They don't have a very good defensive crop. So his statistics don't really back up his level of play. He's much better than his statistics show, just because of the team and situation he's in the KHL. But this last season, he was worse. Everything about him was worse. He does not look like a starter. He looked like more of like a backup long-term now. The reason why is he's thicker, he's heavier set. He's like me now. You can't be looking at like me and playing in net, Jerome. It's ridiculous. So it's one of those situations where his weight transfers have diminished, his lateral mobility is diminished, his edge work isn't as refined as it looked last year or the year before. I don't even know how that's possible. He looks way worse. So now instead of coming over the AHL like he should to get acclimated, he's demanding that he goes from the KHL straight to the NHL. Listen, this is not a situation like Igor Shesterkin or Ilya Sorokin where they were absolutely dominant and easily the best goalie prospects in hockey when they were coming over. That is not the case here. This is a player who's just coming off a down season. So I'll be honest with you, the whole situation reminds me of Vitaly Kravtsov, where it's like, you just never know, right? Some of these Russian kids, and not just Russians, other kids too, who just, they think they're bigger than the sport. They think that they deserve a spot ahead of where they actually deserve it. And it's one of those really unfortunate situations where the right place for him is absolutely in the AHL, and he refuses to go there. So I think it's a lost cause now for Philly, which is unfortunate because, admittedly, like I was sky high on him in his draft year, and rightfully so. I went back, like I'm doing tape of him. I'm doing a 3-part series for the goaltending component of the scouting school on him right now, and I want to make sure I was right on it. He looked way better in his draft year and his +1, +2 than his previous season here. He's gone backwards in his development. So unfortunate situation for Philly fans, but I will say you do have viewers of Reagan who will haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. And he looks fantastic. He looks like one of the top 5 goalie prospects in the sport right now. So at least that's coming. But I will admit, like Ivan Fedotov, who I've tracked over 70 games of, I know Ivan Fedotov inside out. He falls into the Nikita Kwap, Nico Dawes category here where the skating is just too limited. I think Fedotov is going to have a very difficult time in the NHL. I thought of him as at least a decent backup, but after him coming over, I'm worried. So we'll see. But my point is, like Kolosov coming in, he had everything going right for him. He 1 year in the A, and he could have come right in there, and now the situation's all messed up. So I feel really bad for Flyer fans about that. But Jetlachenko's real. Don't forget it. He's coming. The industry's wrong. The public industry is incorrect on Lachenko. You can stamp my name to that. He's going to be huge for you, and he's going to do a whole lot of good things. So a bit of an underrated pool to me because people are sleeping on Lachenko. A lot of people don't understand how good Yuri Reagan was this past season. And they got some interesting depth as well.
Yeah, I don't hate the pick of Carter Soderlund, Spencer Gill, 2 right defensemen who were a bit immature physically in the draft year, so. They're gonna have to gain some power. It's gonna show up in the way they skate. But both are pretty smart. Spencer Gill playing for Rimouski. They're hosting the Mem Cup this year, so he's gonna play a lot of big games this season. Close to a point per game player in the second half of the season last season. So look for him to be one of the top defensemen in the queue this season, if not the best defenseman in the queue. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, Roger McGorty, a new player for the Penguins, who they acquired from Winnipeg. Owen Pickering, Harrison Brunicky, Tanner Howe, Sergei Murashov, Joel Blomqvist. Maybe, Brad, you can touch on those 2 goalies when you get going. Owen Pickering is a very interesting prospect, very lanky. But a really beautiful skater. I remember the first time we saw him skate, you and I were just like, "Whoa, what is going on here?" At the time he was about 6'4.5", just beautiful skater. And anytime you see a big D that can skate like this, you're like, "Okay, we got something here." But his play has been, up and down since his draft. Even the second half of his draft year. He didn't take the next step, I think, that we saw him in. And then his last 2 years in junior, it's been a lot of up and down. He was a surprise. He didn't get an invitation to play at the U20, which was at the time a bit of a surprise. But his play has been up and down. But with guys like him, like he's 6'5", he's still he should play at 215, 220. He's still like under 200 pounds. Like based on the list here, he's 185 pounds. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's a long-term project. Obviously, he's going to play in the AHL this season. So it's going to be an interesting one. Very good athlete. Speaking of good athlete, Harrison Berneke. Oof. Speaking of good skating, that kid can really fly. We just didn't get a ton of viewings on him last season. Like he got hurt for a better part of the second half. He came back with the U18 and he did pretty well there. I think mostly defensively, but the biggest. So we ranked him 38, and he went 44 in his draft. We actually talked about him as a first round potential at some point, but we just didn't have enough viewings or data as far as like hockey sense goes. So that might come back to hurt us in the future if the hockey sense is really good. Like he's gonna become a very good hockey player. If the hockey sense is average as we said it was, like it might limit a bit of his upside for the NHL. Tanner Howe is the guy was one of the older player in the draft, but he plays. He's a very high energy player. I think the skating is just okay for his size. It's not crazy. It's not really good, but it's good enough, I think. And we love the energy that he plays with. Probably he's going to end up being a third line player at the NHL level. If everything goes right. And yeah, Brad, anybody on Pittsburgh you want to maybe go a bit more in details?
Yeah, I think Tanner Howe's underrated. I always have. I have all the time in the world for Tanner Howe. He's like Thomas the Tank Engine. He's got all the will. He's going to find a way and be an impact player, I think. Yeah, Bruneke is the wild card, huh? Like Bruneke, so he reminds me a little bit of Tanner Mollendijk in the sense that he can bypass the first layer of traffic, no issue, and then then he has difficulty optimizing his play, meaning he has all the time and space in the world, and then he just shoots a short side option, the lowest percentage possible option, he takes it, right? Can't seem to identify high danger lateral options when he's at his full speed after bypassing the first layer either. Those are some of the issues. So if he can recalibrate a little bit in terms of like identifying the best options after already bypassing the initial layer of traffic from the back end, then Harrison Bruneke might be something pretty special. But either way, Toolkit's phenomenal, and it's going to go a very long way into helping him at least become some sort of NHL defenseman one day, just because that type of skating, like it's rare. Their goaltending pool is good and hurts me. Sergei Murashov, this is a player I kept going back to. I really liked him. And then I was like, I'm running out of time. I like him, but I'm going to try to be as precise as I can be. I'm going to leave him off the list. Oops. Yeah, that's a massive miss. This is a hurt one. This one hurts me. This is a big one. Murashov looks, I would say, better than Blomqvist, which is why he's slightly ahead of him. I had more time for Blomqvist relative to Murashov in their draft seasons. Actually, we really like Blomqvist in his draft season. I think Blomqvist tops out as a backup. If he plays now, I think we were too bullish. And I think Murashov, who I should have had, is the actual starter. So that's reversed and not good. That makes me upset. So didn't do well with the goalies here. Owen Pickering, he's one of those kids. I feel like he's just going to be better as a pro. Wait for him to turn pro. I think he's just going to figure things out when he turns pro. Sometimes, again, you get kids in the CHL, they become stagnant. They're drafted. They got all sorts of pressure on them. They're trying to figure out how to deal with it with social media, trying to deal with expectations. They're getting validated left and right by everybody in their surrounding environments. Let them turn pro. Then you'll find out what they really are. I still have a lot of time for Owen Pickering as a player. The other thing I'll say is Rucker McGorty. So like Michael Bunting, who they brought in, Rucker McGorty, the Penguins need a net front presence. Their power play suffered. They really need something net front. That's where Bunting's going to thrive. That's where Rucker McGorty's going to thrive. That should really help the Pens power play. And if the Pens can get a better power play, then that might go a really long way into them being able to at least be a bubble playoff team, which is the intention, I think. So, Braden Yager versus Rucker McGorty, definitely give the edge to Rucker. I think as a 1-for-1, the Pens win that trade, but it's also expected that they win that trade because the situation, Rucker handcuffed the Jets. So it's one of those situations where the Jets were never going to get equal value, but at least they got something that made sense for them in terms of the speed component. It's just Rucker. Rucker is a very rare player. Like he's just a chaos generator down low, phenomenal shooter. great frame on him, just a whole lot of energy. He brings a whole lot of what Pittsburgh needs. So it's a great pickup, and he's going to be playing for the Pens for a long time.
Yeah, interesting to see some of the players that came from Carolina, how they're going to do in the Pittsburgh system. So Ponomarev is one, Koivunen is one. I had time for Koivunen in this draft year, but the skating was always like a big question mark. But he's a very smart hockey player. Had a really strong year in Finland last season. Let's see how he does in North America this season. So let's move to Washington, which is the last team we're going to talk about in this episode, and it's actually the 32nd team we're reviewing their prospects. So Ryan Leonard, obviously the number one ranked prospect. No surprise there. He's a beast. He can score. He can be physical. There's a lot to like about Ryan Leonard. Actually, I was a bit surprised that he's staying in college an extra year, but they definitely are making a big run to win the national championship. They have a lot of good player for that for this upcoming season at Boston College. Hendrix Lapierre pretty much played mostly in the NHL last season. I kept him as a prospect. I don't think he's got 82 games of experience in the NHL just yet, but he's probably going to be a full-time NHLer again this season. He went back in the AHL in the playoff. I think he was the playoff MVP in the AHL playoff. So really good for him. Very smart hockey player. He had injury concern in his draft year, but it looks like that's behind him now. He's a smart center that's probably going to move between the second line center and the third line center at the NHL level. Just a very, again, hockey IQ is really strong for Hendrix. Parasak at number 3. He's we had him ranked 20. Washington took him 17. Again, hockey sense, super intelligent hockey player, competes hard. The skating is the weakness here, but there's a lot to like here. I kind of see him as a Tyler Toffoli like player. That was my comp of him during the season. Miroshnichenko, first season in the American Hockey League last season at 19. That's never easy. European coming over and playing in the AHL at 19, but he did not have like a bad season. It was a fine rookie season. He's still going to need some time. Leon Muggley, really loved this pick by Washington at 52. We had him ranked 33. I tried everything to get him in our top 32. Couldn't do it, but we have a lot of time for Muggley. Not a super flashy player, but very dependable player who can skate, who can defend. He's got some pushback in his game. Really looking forward to see him play this season. And that top 10, Brad, to finish, who do you want to maybe focus on here?
Dark horse, probably Andrew Crystal. Like, Andrew Crystal's best games were incredible, and when he was playing poorly, he looked awful. So there's no in between with him for me. He's either going to be a remarkably impactful NHL or he's nothing. I really think he ends up similar to late Johnny Hockey here, or he just doesn't make it. Nowhere near the skater Johnny Hockey was coming up, though. That's the big weakness, right? Can his skating get to the level necessary where he can hold? If it can, then that's that dynamic playmaker that these shooters that we've been talking about here, Tarek Perisic, Miroshnichenko, Ryan Leonard, they need someone like Andrew Crystal. And so he's a huge one for me when it comes to a prospect that needs to hit. Cole Hudson. I think Cole Hudson's underrated. Is he Lane Hudson? No. But does that mean he can't be a useful defenseman in his own right? Like, he's more physical. I think he actually projects to be able to defend a bit better rate than his brother. And yeah, he's not as dynamic from the line, but he's still an incredibly intelligent player who can do a whole lot. I thought he had an underrated season. I really like the pick. Him and Muggley, I thought both were excellent picks. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of some of their mid round selections here, second to mid round selections. The other, Clay Stevenson. So I know this player well. I watched him out of Colgate. I expected him to get signed, and then he went to the exact place you need to go if you want to develop, because Washington's one of the best development places in the world for goalies. Just ask Charlie Lindgren. So Clay Stevenson, I really thought a potential starter when I first saw him. Coming out of the ECHL, I was a little less high on him, and then he put together a pretty good year in the AHL. So I don't exactly know where he's going to end up, but I really do think he's at least an NHLer. So that's something out of a free agent signing that has a tremendous amount of potential. And then as Jérôme, you mentioned Leon Muggley. Like Leon Muggley is another one of these wild cards here where he's a dark horse. I can't wait to see what he looks like this season, see if he can develop some offense that we think might be under the hood there, because the defensive ability is already there. And then the exit retrievals, they're already decent at the National League last season, so they should be that much better this season. So I think underrated crop. It's an underrated crop, and they kind of have unique play. Like Tara Perisic is not what you typically look for in the top half. Like he's the opposite of Michael Hage, essentially, right? Like that's what, like Michael Hage, all neutral zone, handling possession driver, zone entry machine, dynamic playmaker. Like Tara Perisic is like an off puck support dual threat who's intelligent, but very much relies on his off puck instincts and his anticipation of the game and understanding backdoors. Almost like Matvei Michkov in that sense. That specific area is kind of Michkov-like, where he's always looking to try to go backdoor. He's always looking to become a ghost in coverage. He's just that's what his game is, much more subtle than some people might expect, but that doesn't mean he can't be effective and can't be very useful. He's also raw. So one thing I'll say about Perisic, and Miroshnichenko fell into this category as well in his draft season, like they're very raw players. They needed a ton of development time. So it'll be very interesting to monitor them and see what they look like in this coming season.
All right, well, that will do it for this episode. If you've been watching every single video that we've done since the beginning of this team by team review of their prospect depth chart, well, we are now the best friends. We're now best friends. So thank you everyone from watching. And me and Brad will be back in a few weeks. Really the beginning of our podcast. This was like a special series we're doing on their prospect depth chart ranking for each NHL team. But in a few weeks, me and Brad will be back for our regular podcast, and we're pretty excited about it. And we'll talk to you guys in a few weeks.